What's the most invasive species on Earth? Zebra mussels? Cane toads? Kudzu? Cats? Or us? I've seen the claim that humans are an invasive species everywhere, from scientific articles, to news stories, to YouTube videos, my own comment section, social media. And they all say something along the lines of humans are the ultimate invasive species, or humans are the worst invasive species, something like that. But here's the thing, I'm an invasion ecologist and I'm here to set the record straight. Because out of all these sources that I've found, I either completely disagree with them, or I feel like they're incomplete, or coming from somebody who doesn't actually know the science behind invasive species ecology. And that's okay. That's where people like me come in. My name's Nick. I'm a PhD student who studies invasive species, and today I want to answer a question that sounds simple, but it can be kind of complicated. Are humans actually an invasive species? But before we can answer that question, we need to be on the same page about what an invasive species actually is, because in ecology, words and definitions matter quite a bit. According to the U.S. National Invasive Species Information Center, an invasive species is defined as a non-native organism whose introduction causes or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human health. But in invasive species ecology, we define it like this. In order to be considered an invasive species, a species has to meet 4 criteria. The first is that species has to be introduced to an area outside its native range. The second is that species has to be able to establish a population in that new area. And by establish a population, we mean a reproducing population. So they have to be able to reproduce in the new area. The third thing is that species and that population has to be able to spread from the new area that it was introduced to. And then the fourth and final thing is that the population and that species has to cause some kind of negative impact. So it has to be a non-native species introduced to a new area, it has to establish a population, and it has to spread to new areas, and it has to cause some kind of harm. Do you notice something about these definitions so far? They don't just say causes harm. There's a lot of other requirements that a species has to meet to be considered invasive. And honestly, it's not hard for us to see why people look at invasive species and humans and make the comparison and come to the conclusion that humans are an invasive species. Because honestly, if you think about all the environmental damage humans cause, it's kind of insane. There's a paper published in Scientific American that calls humans the ultimate invader. Other articles and opinion pieces argue that humans are an invasive species because we originated in Africa and then spread across the globe. And honestly, if you look at our ecological impact, it's hard to argue otherwise. But here's where things get interesting. Almost every definition contains the word introduced. So let me explain what I mean. Zebra mussels did not swim across the Atlantic. They were carried across the Atlantic in ship ballast water. Burmese pythons didn't naturally colonize Florida. People released them into the Everglades. Emerald ash borers didn't fly across the Pacific. People accidentally moved them. In invasion biology and ecology, introduction almost always means a species crossed a barrier because of human activity. And by barrier, I mean the natural forces keeping species within their native range. And the thing about humans is we didn't wait for another species to move us. We moved ourselves. The natural barriers that kept us within our native range, we overcame them. We made clothing, we mastered fire, we built shelters. We used boats to cross massive water bodies. We developed languages to communicate with each other more effectively. We are beasts with projectile weapons. I mean, without projectile weapons, we would be cooked, right? And we also have this trait called hyper-prosociality, which just means we cooperate with non-related individuals more than we would expect from other animals. One of the papers I read for this video was by anthropologist Curtis Marion, I hope I'm saying that right, and he is actually where the term hyper-prosociality comes from. And according to him, that cooperation helped Homo sapiens spread into new areas that had never been occupied by any other human species. So unlike invasive species, we didn't hitchhike, we adapted. So yeah, every species has a native range, including us. And those ranges aren't arbitrary, they're the product of millions of years of evolution. And those ranges are limited by things like climate, food availability, predators, geography, and physiology. And us Homo sapiens face barriers too. We faced mountains, deserts, oceans, ice ages. But instead of waiting for evolution to solve those problems, we solve them ourselves. So if a species has the capability to expand its own range, is that an introduction? I don't think so. I don't think humans fit the ecological definition of invasive species. Not because we haven't transformed ecosystems, because we absolutely have, and not because our expansion hasn't driven extinctions, it clearly has. I don't think we fit the definition of an invasive species because we were not introduced by another organism. We crossed those barriers ourselves. We adapted to those environments ourselves. So in my view, humans didn't invade the world, we colonized it. Homo sapiens are probably the most ecologically transformative species that has ever lived. We reshape landscapes, alter the climate, we drive extinctions. I mean, heck, we transport thousands of invasive species across the planet all the time. But from an ecological standpoint, I don't think humans are an invasive species. We certainly do not meet the definition of an invasive species. Now, before you get mad at me in the comments, trust me, I understand the impacts that we have on our planet, and I think that it is our responsibility to be stewards of our planet. We are the only species capable of complex thought and solving problems at massive scales. So are we invasive? No. Do we cause insane amounts of harm to the place we call home? Absolutely. And we need to change that. So yeah, those are my thoughts on whether or not humans are an invasive species from an invasive species ecologist standpoint. We are not an invasive species. Please argue with me in the comments if you feel like you need to. This is what I do for a living, so I plan on making many more videos and shorts about invasive species. This is actually the first long-form video for this channel, so I'm really excited to upload it and show you guys a little bit more of my personality, because I can't really show much of my personality in a 60-second short. So yeah, if you like this video, please subscribe and follow along for more, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching. Peace.